Hi, welcome to Cauldron Brew. I am Jay Woodwolf, and I'm here with my co-host Julie Rockwell, and we're also here with guest Jason. He was with us once before for the Norse paganism episode. Welcome in, Jason.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, today we're talking about male mysteries. Any questions, Julie?
No, I'm just gonna sit back with this one, and if questions come up, I'll ask. But this is all for you guys. Mine's
All
next
right,
week.
Jason. What do you have for us out of the Norse, as far as male mysteries go?
Specifically for the Norse,
Well, anything that you've learned through your studies or whatever.
I did a bit of research on the topic because I wasn't quite sure what male mysteries was until you brought up the topic a couple weeks ago. You mentioned it, so I looked it up. From what I gathered, it is kind of a newer age thing. It's basically a term for traditions and ways of life passed down, typically between father and son, or just an older male figure educating the pupil. And this could cover like a variety of topics, from knowing how to provide for yourself or your kin, how to fit and adapt to society. That includes like the morality of society. Sometimes it could mean what it means to be a warrior, or really whatever the male figure is teaching the pupil. Could also be what it means to be a family man or a lover, and sometimes between strength and power, how and when to use it. No one, it's not a healthy way to be the brute that crushes everything, is in masculinity in the wrong sense.
Do you think the gods themselves give us examples?
From what we have in the stories, they have good examples and bad examples. In Norse mythology specifically, there's instances where there's good examples of fatherhood, and then there's examples that are very graphic. And I won't mention word for word what goes on, but toxic masculinity obviously wasn't a concept to them back then, so they just kind of said what they said in their stories, and pretty graphic.
Well, I would imagine so. Um, what examples do you think are some of the good ones?
Some of the good ones, I believe, are like teaching your son. I'm just going to basically preference it from a father to son perspective, even though, like I mentioned, it could be from any perspective of an older male teaching a younger male. Teaching a son, for example, how to shave. That's not exactly the same way that a mother would teach her daughter how to shave, because more men, with the facial hair. So, how to
Right.
groom himself, uh, teaching him how to dress presentable, how to have manners. It's, you know, a mom could teach a son that too, but there's just a certain way and a type of bonding that happens when a father and a son are going over these sorts of things. Because the guy, like the son, can relate to the dad on a level that you just can't relate to the mom. Even though
Yeah.
it's your mother, it's your family, you love them both, but like there's a difference.
Oh, definitely.
Um, so could that be like a mentor with a mentee, like male to male, like an older gentleman with a younger gentleman teaching like survival skills? You
Yeah.
think that could
Oh
correlate?
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Uh per se, someone needs to teach someone like how to make fires, how to go camping in certain ways. In ancient times, that was obviously way more male dominated, between the male figure, the male student,
Yeah,
different
mostly
forms of.
when we went out hunting to provide for the clan.
Yeah. In most cultures and traditions, hunting was almost explicitly done by the females. It's not 100% everywhere, but the majority of human nature has been. the male goes out and does it. So there were hunter gatherer cultures,
Mm-hmm.
and so like the men had the tradition of hunting. You would need to know things like how to string bows, how to make weapons and ammo for the bows.
Do you think those things were actually taught by like father to son or even an older gentleman?
I think so. Most of the time, it was either that or a certain elder that was well known of the field. For instance, like a medicine man, that wasn't likely to be taught from father to son, depending on, again, the culture. But for instance, it's a job placement. So the medicine man would be teaching the selected student what to be doing in that situation. And that wouldn't have the father son bond, but it would still be male to male for that group.
Okay. Far as like with modern times, and let's say if you had your own kindred, uh, per se, how would you do it? Like the training, would it be male, like an older gentleman with a newer gentleman to the ways, or would you do it like male to female, or vice versa? Or how would you personally run the training?
I guess it really depends on what exactly you're training. Uh, in today's modern times, the difference between sexes has been blurred a lot, and the importance of one performing in certain jobs has been reduced. I mean, we know now women are pretty much just as capable in most things as men are, with give and take, like muscle structure is different, but they can still be strong to an equal degree.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I guess at this point in modern times, it really comes down to the knowledge of what you know and what you can teach.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I was raised by my mom here for the most part. My parents were divorced, so they were split up. Most of what I learned in life came through my mom, and typically whatever wasn't was usually either from my dad or through the internet. Most of what I learned through my dad was a lot of the warrior culture because he was a Marine and he was very proud of it. My grandfather was a Marine, so he had kind of that this is a tradition type deal going on. And he wanted me to join the military as well, even though I was like 6, 7. I had no voice in really what that meant or any idea. So I was just like, yeah, Dad, I love Army Man movies. I love the little Army Man toys, sure thing. So there's like, it's easy for a parent to persuade a kid of doing something that they think looks cool. Because around the same age, my dad said, when you get older, you're going to have a kid and carry on the family line. And at like 6 or 7, that was gross. Girls have cooties. I don't want any of that. But interestingly, it actually really invaded and stuck in my mind a lot. And ever since, I didn't want to admit it, but in the back of my head, there was always the fact like, whatever it means to be of this family line, he found it important enough to tell me I need a kid. And as time went on, my personal ideals that I gathered over time aligned with that. So I think that's an interesting dynamic between different cultures and families of just how easy it is for a child, typically a son, to be shaped by what their father says or wants. Because another instance of that was growing up, I really loved dinosaurs, and all the dinosaur movies were coming out, like The Land Before Time and Jurassic Park. It was perfect to be a kid growing up in the 90s and see all these more recent ish, they're before my time, but they're recent enough, dinosaur examples. And it was just so cool and perfect. And I was like, I want to be an archaeologist. It doesn't even have to be dinosaurs I'm digging up. I just really like the idea of finding history and being the one to find it and learning about the past and thinking about it. And I was on a phone telling that to my dad one day, and he says, well, that doesn't make any sense. Pretty much everything important had been discovered already. And at the time, like, you're 6 or 7. What are you going to tell your dad when he says everything's been discovered? I don't know. I'm not looking in National Geographic and seeing things are still being discovered. And school is just teaching me stuff that everyone's been taught. So that kind of killed my drive to want to be an archaeologist because I was like, well, dad said this or that.
I remember
As time
that.
as time went on, I did mature enough to realize, well, at this point, it's my own problem. I'm not trying to be an archaeologist. I'm like 26. There's more than enough time to learn the stuff for archaeology. And, you know, at that point, it's my problem. But that's just another example of how male influence to another male can be so decisive and so heavy. You don't even realize it as a kid growing up, but it's there and it forms like a building block in your mind. And it doesn't even have to be your dad. Sometimes it does that. If I had a specific male teacher, like in high school, I had this teacher. He was an English teacher. He was really funny. We got along great. But he really was setting the bar on me, like, you need to do these classes or, get these assignments done because he believed in me that I had a good mind for writing stories and being imaginative with what was going on there. And even though, well past the age of being easily manipulated as a 7-year old, I was at least 16, 17 around there. I found that through a male mentor, he was able to really help build up my courage and enforce what really it just spoke to me in a way that some female teachers couldn't get across.
Hey, Jason, it doesn't look like your voice is registering on the recording.
Oh, okay. Maybe if I can get the mic a little more in my face so that it picks it up better. Okay. Um, so as I was saying, hopefully not too much of that was all missing. Uh, English teacher was teaching me basically, you're really good with the class, and I believe that you can do good things with this sort of subject. And it inspired me. And even though I had had praise from female teachers, it just, I guess as a guy personally, I just think it hits different. And there's a different level because you feel like you can connect with them more and they might understand you better, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Those, but I live in modern times, so these are all modern examples. My dad
I
never
know
took me hunting.
amongst like the ancient druids, how they would pass down their teachings would be through male to female. Like an older gentleman will take on, a female that's learning the druid ways, and an older female, would train a guy that was coming into druidry.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea.
Yeah, they didn't leave a whole lot of writing explaining everything.
No, they didn't. Writing was
May-
not a concept.
Maybe they thought it was kind of a balance of the sexes so that some
So you would
things.
have both male and female energy.
Maybe, yeah, something like that.
Okay. So, do you think the whole male dynamic, where learning from an older gentleman, is necessary part of life or not?
I think it's beneficial and can have positive feedback on that. Obviously, the man has to be a good person, not abusive and manipulative in a negative way that'll harm the
Right.
person's
He has to
upbringing.
be,
So,
an
in an
upstanding,
environment where everyone
honorable.
here is nice, yes, I believe it would be a good role model, and a boy growing into a man would have a good example of what it would be to emulate that man that raised him.
Mm-hmm.
Because a woman could teach you pretty much just about everything there is to know about life,
Right.
but she performs usually different tasks in society and physically between, like being able to bear a child. Like she can't express what that's like to a boy because
No.
he's never going to be in that position, biologically speaking, anyway. I mean, unless science gets real crazy, I don't see it doing that anytime soon yet. But for right now, as we are, yeah, a female just can't teach motherhood to a boy.
Right.
the same way that a father would have a difficult time explaining to a girl what it's like to do fatherly stuff.
So there is an importance there.
I believe so, especially for being a good role model and to emulate what you grow up to be as, because humans are sponges. Yeah,
Right.
I think it is important we at least have that to a degree.
See, one of the things that I learned actually from my dad, well, there was a couple of things. Um, one, working on cars, and two, fishing. Of course, my mom wasn't going to get out there and work on a car. That was not her thing. And two, my mom was not going to touch a a live fish. She no, or gut one for that matter. She'll cook it, she'll clean it, but no.
Yeah. I think yeah, those fall under like survival skills that a woman could technically teach, but typically
Yeah,
you'll see a man teaching these things because at least in our society and how we've gone, those are typically male things.
yeah,
A lot of things could change depending on the society. Like how you mentioned the druids, a lot of their teaching goes between female to male, male to female. But there's like really core concept things like maturity that I think a guy typically explains with ease compared to a female about maturity to a guy.
right.
Like in non-graphic types of stuff. Wet dreams per se. That's something that typically only guys deal with, and a woman is usually only going to know about it if she lived with brothers that went through that.
Right. Yeah.
So that's something biologically that only a guy typically would get. It's possible for
Right.
a female to know about it, but it's the same way that you don't need to teach a boy about a period until he gets to the age where he starts hanging around girls more, typically early teenage age, something like that. Because then you're going to want to know about what's going on with them, and it becomes a them topic. But when it's a us topic, it's
Yeah,
easier for a male to male.
right. And when it comes to, we could discuss this next week when we discuss the female energies or the female mysteries, but like, um, I think it'd be a little uncomfortable for the dad to explain to his daughter why she has that monthly visitor. I think it would be more suitable for mom to explain that to her daughter.
Oh,
Yeah,
excuse me. Oh yeah, it definitely is because raising two boys and I have a daughter, so it's to where trying to when I was raising Jace, there was some male, what do you call it? Like in the adolescence, so like puberty. That's it. Sorry. It's to where it was hard to really explain to him what goes on because he's looking at me like I'm mom, so it was hard to figure out how to talk to him as questions would arise because he lived with me almost the whole time,
Right.
and so to talk to him about it, it was hard because I couldn't explain it like how I could with my daughter with the
Yeah.
female stuff. It was it's interesting. That's like with my youngest son, a lot of it I would tell, with Jace, I'm like, hey, if he has questions, and that's where the older brother would come in and be like, work with him on, shaving and stuff like that. If he, wanted, because he emulates Jace.
Yeah.
So he looks
And
up to
Jason would
him.
be a good role model for his brother, so
Oh, yeah, he is. Well, even his sister looks up to him. So it's because of how, he is.
yeah. I was gonna say I had to help raise my sister in kind of a dad position. Not too much. Like there's only so much that I could do.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah, but you stepped up to the plate when it counted. Well, you always stepped up to the plate, but with a lot of different things like a father-daughter dance, Jay
yeah.
stepped right up and took her, and had no problem because he saw that because couldn't take her, they wouldn't allow it at the school.
Right.
So, and she wanted to be with her friends and with other guys, they're all with their dads. So Jason, that's where he stepped up and would
Mhm.
take her and stuff. So I know with him being that role model and being able to work with, you know, other, doing the stuff, he has that mentality to do that.
I bet that made you proud.
Yeah, she's actually turned out very nice. I'd be proud of her as a daughter. So it's enjoyable having her as a sister. We get along pretty good. Our humor's similar.
Yeah,
Uh,
she's
Pretty
working on
similar
that.
taste and like culture. She likes video games, and we like most of the same music. That one's
Well,
always between
uh,
people different.
I'm glad you have that relationship with your sister. I have two sisters, and I don't have that at all with neither
Yeah,
one.
it always depends on the situation. Her father wasn't quite able to be around sometimes, and even if he had the chance, sometimes he probably wouldn't. So it just became like I'm the male in the house. I wasn't really even old enough to be quite a dad yet,
Right.
but
Right.
I learned you don't need to be a dad or be a mature male to be able to step into a male role model position. There's
Yeah.
tons of movies as well of like uh probably tons of movies I feel like where it's two adolescent kids, one's the obvious older brother and whatever he's doing is usually depicted to directly influence what happens to the younger brother or influences the younger brother's decisions and actions. So stuff like that can go on all the way to childhood. Like um, two brothers of a near similar age, the younger one typically always looks up to the older one to a degree. And even that, I feel like, constitutes a sort of male mystery because what goes on between two sisters and two brothers is vastly different in my
Right.
experience of watching how things have gone.
Oh yeah.
So here is a comment from YouTube. See, this is given by a woman. See, I was taught by my dad how to hunt, fish, etc., descale fish, how to clean rabbit, etc., all that stuff. My mom wouldn't touch any of that stuff when it was brought home.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm sure there's quite a bit of that to where, I don't know, like if she wanted to learn, the dad or whoever is in that life could be an older brother, whatever, has no problem teaching, then that way she has that knowledge. And,
Yeah.
she could help her son with that if there was never a male figure in the life to help that.
Yeah, it's like
Bobby, did that help you bond with your father more by learning that from him? Let's see what she says.
Oh, she respond. Oh, that's right. She responds on the YouTube.
Yeah, she's on YouTube.
Okay.
She's in the chat on YouTube.
but yeah, that spectrum, father teaching a daughter what typically you regard as male mysteries is really just fatherhood teaching your kids these sorts of things. It doesn't need to be a boy that you're teaching to do fishing, hunting, or anything that's typically a male dominated area of expertise. That's when
Right.
Oh no.
it shifts from male to fatherhood, and then it's up to father how he wants to do it. And then if she wants to teach either gender of her kid, then it's just like a family tradition at that point and doesn't quite become so much of a male thing. Even though in
Right.
society, hunting and fishing is more male stuff.
Yeah, and that actually helped her bond with her father even more, which is cool. Also, Jason, what do you think that, not just in society, both present and past, where do you think that spiritually does the Mel Mysteries can direct us? as
That's what I
guys.
was contemplating for a little bit, because from what I was gathering originally in the research, most of the male mystery seems to be more teaching other boys how to be proper men and not the degenerates that are always lining the prison cells. But
Right.
then I thought, well, where does the spirituality come in on this? Because there's a lot of stuff that seems in history to be nothing really stands out as like only men were taught this magic or only female magic came from this. It seems obvious with male and female deities that maybe the male's preferenced on this or that. But spiritually, I think it depends on what type of spirituality you're going down. For instance, in Germanic paganism, there's Wotan, Woden. He was more associated with the warrior culture. And so typically, you would imagine most of their practices, rituals were primarily performed by men. And
Hmm.
that information would need to be relayed to the sons of the clan so they could perform it. And so there's like a bond between most men that they would have to a male deity like Odin. There's obviously females that are obviously all interested in the male deities as well. There's never anything explicit that I know that states women can't have anything to do with the gods or goddesses of any
Right.
way of direction. Uh, but they just exude a certain way that men are drawn easier towards in their biological setup. As a guy, we are primarily able to just ease into things like violence and protecting our loved ones. And so Thor would speak out for those who have a really protective nature. And then you would typically think, like, okay, well, then Freya and other Germanic goddesses, maybe. I'm just mostly coming from Germanic point of view. There's so many cultures I can't list all the directions it comes from. But you would think, okay, well, then the women get the goddesses. But then actually, no, because it's just so dynamic. So it
Do you
really
think
just
like
comes
the
down to
stories that we know, like from folklore, about the different gods that can show us how to be better people? I know there's some good examples and some bad examples, also in the Celtic stuff as well. Um, but do you think there are examples there that we can learn from and to become better people?
I do believe so, yes. Most of these stories are devised to help teach people from different angles or to at least express what happened in history with something. If you didn't want to repeat a certain story from history, you would go out of your way to not do exactly what the people did in that story. And for the stories that do teach people, you might feel inspired to emulate a character that you can most what was the term, relate to, the character you can most relate to. As a guy, it's just naturally easier to relate to the male characters in the stories, and a female would probably have an easier time relating to the female characters in the stories. Unfortunately, most of these stories don't cover much of the ground from the female perspective. These are typically recorded from males, but there is at least occasionally good evidence of women having strong standpoints, and they would have their things that they could learn from the stories. Men had their things they could learn. And in between, it's just a whole societal, we all learn together type of deal.
Right.
Because the biggest problem is when we try to separate too much from male from female, we got to have one and the other to exist as an entity on this earth. But there is clear differences in us.
Hmm. Uh, that's all I have. What about you, Jace?
Uh, I could list different forms of teaching, things that I
Okay.
learned, like that I've seen through like history. There's the standard father to son, or a male family member to son. Let's say your father wasn't able to be around, so maybe your grandpa would be your male role model that you would learn from, and he would teach you what he could. There's quite a few examples of that in media and history. Uh, in
I
terms of
did learn a few
nobility,
things from my grandfather.
oh yeah, and me as well. Between both of my grandfathers and also just friends and their older family members, sometimes you can learn from them.
Yeah.
More exclusive to the nobility would be a trusted advisor to a son. So, like, a king probably doesn't have all the time to really be a proper father. And for one example, Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor. He was obviously, busy being the emperor of Rome. He didn't have time to quite sit there and be the father that he wished he probably was.
Right.
So you would typically entrust the male to your son, or any male really, to an advisor. And if that wasn't the case, I think he even mentions in his own book Meditations, I think women might have taught him some certain things. There was different teachers. So it wasn't always just men teaching you everything. Sometimes there would be women teaching you things as well throughout history. Your mom obviously plays a role in your life to teach you things, but that doesn't
Oh
quite go
yeah.
down a male mystery. That's
Right. My
that's a
mom taught me how to
mother-son
cook.
mystery. Yeah, my mom did
I,
pretty good with teaching me as well. My dad taught me to wear a shirt when cooking bacon. That's what he taught me.
there you go.
There's a male mystery for you. Wear a shirt when cooking bacon.
Yes.
I don't think women would get it. Typically, they always wear something. But women, if you're not wearing a shirt, here's a tip from the men: wear a shirt or a bra while cooking bacon. It helps.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll probably help you more.
I actually know somebody who at one time he was cooking, but he was in his boxers and I forgot what the fuck, but it splashed up and hit him, and he's like, "Oh my god,
Yep.
Oh,
wear clothing." Just
yeah,
saying.
especially with grease. Yes.
Yes.
Yep. And another form of teaching would be an elder of some societal importance, like I've kind of mentioned earlier, with like an important member of a certain job, maybe. This would typically be called, I think it was pederasty. This was something commonly practiced in Greece, where someone who wasn't quite related to you but knew of the teaching of a certain way would teach the young male. Now, there is the slight like asterisk heads up. By the way, if you search up any pederasty, there's a bunch of stuff with pedophilia that comes up, and this was
Is
a rampant problem in Greece where an older
Yes, very
male
rampant problem.
was getting with the younger men, and they're just like, "So I'm going to teach you stuff, but your payment might also be grossly sexual in nature." And
They
then
had a fucked society to begin with.
parts of it, a lot of the actual society didn't like it, and there's a lot of cases of like in their plays where they straight call out people who are doing that and mock
Oh,
them. Yeah, there's a good video I'll show you later. It shows Greece in a totally different perspective than what a lot of people like to typically make out as Greece culture. But that's a whole nother topic for a different day. But yeah, it was something that happened in Greece. Unfortunately, more or less common. Typically, the higher ups were doing it. But
no.
it was
So the
to
aristocrats.
typically the aristocrats. Yes,
so it's like a reoccurring thing with the upper ones back in the day.
Yeah.
yeah, we haven't changed too much, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
But as far as my research went, that's about the typical male to male teaching methods. And the actual topics of what they did can range from anything. If you're a guy listening and a male figure taught you stuff that probably wasn't taught at the same time by a woman, then you know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because you could probably sit here all day and just be like, well, one thing that Mr. Jefferson taught me was, and then
Right.
something that you've never heard any female have to come into contact with because it's never been something that's part of their life.
Alrighty. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Before I let everybody go and shut down this live stream, if any listeners that are men that are out there, if you want to learn more about this topic, I have a book for you to read. It's called Sons of the Goddess by Christopher Pensick. So any of you Wiccan men out there that wants to learn more on this topic, go ahead, go get that book. It's a men's guide to Wicca. Um, Quite interesting book to read. But that's all we have for today. Thanks for watching, everyone.